Welcome back to Respect the Process. I am Kelly Hunter, and I am in studio, but I am joined by my good friend, who we're just going to call him Carmen Sandiego for the next few weeks, finding out where in the heck Chris Stewart is. Chris Stewart, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm in the same town you're in today,
Okay,
but
okay.
father duties called me to handle carpool for my son's high middle school golf match. So, Frank House Municipal Golf Course,
Nice.
the broadcast background today,
Okay.
which is not a bad one to have.
No, because I don't know. Again, we always talk about what you have done to either the schedule makers or whoever decides where you're going. Because first on your travel log is Cleveland, Ohio.
Lovely this time of year.
Cleveland, Ohio. And I brought again my visual aid, my Cleveland Rocks sweatshirt.
Yes, I,
Yes.
I think whenever I think Cleveland, I think Drew
Yeah.
Carey and the TV show and the Great Open with Cleveland Rocks. The
I
only
know
problem.
you're not going to have a lot of spare time, but you can go and see where the river caught fire, because
Yeah,
the whole mistake on the lake. Go
I,
see where
I
Jake
am
Taylor,
looking forward to. Yes, God, that's a great
see
reference.
where he hit
Major
his,
League.
yeah, he faked us all, called a shot, and then bunted. And I was trying to think of other things. My friends from college, Ellen and Meg, live in Cleveland, so if you want to call them, but it's a good thing you've got some good basketball.
Got some good basketball. I hope it's more than one game. The last time I was in Cleveland for an early tip, um, we ultimately learned about this guy who coached the team that upset Mark Gottfried's, I think, then fourth seeded Crimson Tide in the NCAA tournament, and he became a pretty good coach. It's Bruce Pearl when he was at Wisconsin, Milwaukee, knocked off Alabama. Uh, Gosh, I've forgotten exactly which year it was, but
I'm getting ready to make a
yeah.
really obscure reference. Go ahead. Go ahead. Keep talking.
No, I was just going to say though that's really where everything started, big time career wise um, for Bruce Pearl was beating Alabama, and then they won the next round to get into the Sweet 16, and from there he got the Tennessee job, and certainly made the most of that opportunity. But
Do you
it's the
remember how
crazy,
many
and again,
threes it felt like were raining down?
uh,
I don't know. If it's. I think
there's
the movie is
there were
something about Polly. Um, um, Tyler, you can't hear me,
uh,
but there's a and the guy. It's not John C. Riley. He's got it's another three named guy, and every time he's playing basketball, he's like Rain Dance, Rain Man, and I
I
felt like
have
that's exactly.
absolutely no clue what you're
It's
talking
okay.
about.
That was again an obscure reference. Okay, so what are the travel plans?
The travel plans are on Wednesday around lunchtime. We will fly to Cleveland, and should the Tide take care of business in the first game against Robert Morris, we will go from uh, a Friday game to a Sunday matchup against either St. Mary's or Vanderbilt. And if that is an afternoon game, excuse me, if that game that tips after three, and I know they shot you, it's all dictated by television. But if Alabama's game in the round of 32 is after 3 o'clock and Bama wins it,
Okay,
then we will stay on the road, I'm told. We'll go on to Newark, New Jersey,
again,
because then you play Thursday, Saturday, again, garden spots.
and I was gonna say
Uh,
another vacation spot this time of year. I'm amazed that y'all could get rooms.
no question.
Uh,
Uh, but yeah, we would go, for some reason, the way the bracket works, if you're in one of the games that are set up for after 3 o'clock, that means you'll play the next week. The winner of that game plays Thursday, Saturday.
okay.
So we would stay on the road. If
That's what y'all did last year too,
Sunday's
didn't you? When you
game,
were out west.
Sunday's game would be a uh, pre 3 o'clock game, then we would come back because that puts you in the Friday Sunday
Okay.
bracket.
All right.
But yes, we did go. We did go from Spokane to LA last year and
Yeah.
stayed on the road for the first two rounds for that very reason.
Um, okay. I think the first thing. Well, a couple things. Number one, did they have a watch party on Sunday?
Just the team,
Yeah. Okay.
just the team did. They were gathered and watched it in the team room, uh, but that was it. There was no real drama
Yeah.
on this. They knew they were pretty much a lock for a 2 seed after they got beat in the semifinals of the conference tournament. And it's the amazing thing, Kelly. You know this. I mean, you worked in television for years in Birmingham. Besides uh, what you've done in radio, but we tended to live on the bubble
Oh gosh.
from a Bama perspective so many
Chris, I
years, and
remember sitting
uh,
in, Mark Gottfried let us sit in one year for a watch party. And then they got to the last site and did not call their name. And I mean, you want to talk about
that was the
uncomfortable.
last time.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, living on that bubble,
That
but
was,
golly,
if I'm not mistaken, Kelly,
two-
that would have been
99 or 2000?
not. It would have been. Uh, it was Here's why I think it was 2000, because the next year, 2000 and 2001 season, they got into the tournament.
Yeah.
The next year, they won the league championship,
Yep.
and the next year was my first year on radio. So
But
I think I think the uh, that particular year you're talking about was the one where they didn't make it and they had 20 plus
yep.
wins. That was the year that Georgia only had 16 victories, if I'm not mistaken. Jim Herrick was the head coach. They had 16 wins, but they had back then the RPI
Yep.
was very
The good
strong.
old RPI.
And that changed, frankly, how teams scheduled. No disrespect intended, because the Formula One and he had great teams. But Wimp used to he talk about playing Sisters of the Poor
Yep.
and would build that resume to get you in the tournament,
Get your 20 wins.
uh, get your 20 wins. Now, again, Wimp didn't need to apologize to anybody for who and what he played, because in the conference where you don't dictate your schedule, he was the postseason was his.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal, good as anybody's ever been in the SEC tournament. But he knew how to work the system, just like Jim Herrick figured out how to work the system. Didn't really matter how many wins you had. If you had a strong enough schedule, you're going to get in.
Yeah.
And there are teams that do that now. Nate does both.
Right.
Nate gets wins, but
And
he also schedules as tough as anybody.
yeah.
Of the 33 games that Alabama played this year, so far this season, counting the SEC tournament and the regular season, 33 games played, 25 have come against NCAA tournament teams.
I mean, that's what's crazy. I was thinking about that, on Sunday when, you're thinking about teams and watching to wait and see. And I remember that particular year, I think Boise was a site, and we're all sitting there going, boy, I hope we don't have to go to Boise. And then they call out the last team, and Alabama is just sitting there kind of stunned, and you're just like, oh, maybe Boise wouldn't have been so bad after all.
Boise
But
wouldn't have been
I
rough.
really just want to get out of here at this point because no one is comfortable. Okay, speaking of comfortable, I know you had, obviously you have the coaches show with Nate Oats, and one of the first questions and one that is on everyone's mind is, what is the health status of Grant Nelson moving forward now?
Yeah. I think you'll see Grant this weekend. I don't know if that means Friday, um,
I would think that if they
but I
could,
think
they
you'll
would
see him this weekend.
they would allow, if they can, they would keep him on the bench Friday if possible.
That is my guess.
Yeah.
Nate didn't say that point blank to me, but that's what I would think. If you've got anything questionable and you've got a 2-15 matchup, that's where you can challenge your team and go, look, would you rather play the 15 without Grant Nelson and try to have him at 100% for a matchup in the 7-10 game? Or do you roll the dice, maybe further injure him and not have him at all for the 7-10 game or beyond? So I think that's, if I'm just guessing, and that's all I'm doing, you would probably not see him unless he's just had a major turnaround in how he's feeling and how he looks. Uh, but even though he's okay, and I don't think it's anything they expect to be long term, I do think that it would be more likely to see him play in a Sunday game as opposed to the first one on Friday.
Yeah, he's been banged up I mean, you get to this point in the season, and as many games as they have played straight, no one is 100%, but to see him go down on Saturday evening, really only getting 10 minutes into that game, and then hearing knee, that's a scary thought. And obviously,
Yeah.
it's nothing that is immediate and has to be taken care of emergent?
I'm not 100% sure. I think he, I think he banged knees with somebody. I don't think that there was anything that he twisted. I don't know that for sure, but that's kind of how it looked, and that's kind of the impression that I've gotten. But if you don't think Grant Nelson truly matters, then you weren't paying attention to the last game of the
Absolutely,
regular
yeah.
season, the first game of the conference tournament on Friday, and the second half of the game against Florida, because that's a one possession game. Really, I guess Grant went down late first half, but Bama either had the lead or it's a one possession game either way when he left the game because of injury. And the tone, unfortunately for Alabama, and I think it's kind of weird to say you have wake up calls this time of the season anyway. But if there was ever an in your face moment of how important it is to establish yourself early in a half,
Yeah.
Alabama gave up. It wasn't a second chance opportunity.
Oh,
It was a fifth chance opportunity for Florida on their first offensive trip down the floor. And while they didn't get points, the tone was set. They were the aggressor, and
well,
Alabama saw it slip and slip in a hurry the other direction.
when you look at the numbers, and you really don't want to look at too many numbers from this game against Florida on Saturday. Florida, they got 12 points off turnovers. Their points in the paint, they had 42 points in the paint. And granted, Florida has now become the darling of March Madness, and deservedly so, because they're playing like a juggernaut right now. Because when you talk about points in the paint, you talk about their three big guys. But without Grant Nelson in that game, Florida out-rebounded Alabama. They had, well, no, equal blocks, but they had more steals than Alabama. It was a one-sided game there in the second half when you knew that Grant Nelson was not going to be in the game. And the mood changed very quickly. And that's what I was curious about. Like, how was the mood in talking to Coach Oates last night?
He was fine. It looked like the page had been turned,
Yeah, okay.
very much so.
Yeah.
But he was not happy when that game ended. Obviously on Saturday, you're never happy when you lose. But I mean, he was really um, disappointed and upset with how they played. Uh, and I'm not pinning it on any one, two, or three guys, but Cliff Amore had one rebound in that game. He sat him the majority of the second half,
Well, and even you look at
or a good bit of it.
even guard play. LeBaron had a great game against Kentucky with 18 points, but then you turn around and he had 3 against Florida.
Yeah, was great against Auburn and Kentucky,
Yeah.
but didn't show up numbers wise for the game against Florida. Mark didn't have a great game against Florida, and nobody did, really and truly. I mean, I think Mo had a double double, but man, there were a lot of opportunities, and a lot of it came at a time where the outcome was decided. So that was a rough effort from the whole squad, and obviously, if you have that type of performance again, you won't have another chance to avenge it because you'll be done.
With Florida, I mean, you're one of the last people to have seen them up close in person. This team looks like it is built to win. I mean, is this
They
one of
are.
those teams that not only are they playing well at this point in the season, but they also seem to have that little touch of magic right now, which is what you need
Eh,
in order to get to
they
April?
can you keep it
Yeah.
going once it turns to this tournament, though? Now, certainly, you'd be foolish not to put them in a group with Duke and Houston, maybe, of the teams that you're going into the tournament or playing the best right now. But even though they got beat, Tennessee's playing well. Uh, as Bruce Pearl said, yeah, we've dropped 3 of our last 5, but look at who we were for. Look at who they played.
Yeah.
The worst loss was against a 4 seed on their home floor. Um, you may as well have been playing I'm not going to say they play a road game against Tennessee. They're playing in the state of Tennessee, and but there's a ton of Auburn fans there, and obviously there's a ton of Tennessee Orange there, but there was a bunch of Auburn folks in that building as well. Um, Alabama, uh, the Alabama we saw against Florida and Kentucky, yeah, excuse me, against Auburn and Kentucky. That version of Alabama can win the national championship. The version that we saw against Florida could lose to a 28-4 Robert Morris team if they don't get after it early on. So um, a lot to be decided. I think there's probably, I don't know, and I'm probably expanding it too far to say there are 8 teams that I would say have a really good chance at winning the NCAA tournament. But I think you would start with the conversation on Florida, um, Duke, Houston, and it wouldn't take you very long to get to Auburn and um, some others
Well,
close
I mean,
there,
we could.
including Alabama.
That's the thing. We could go down the line because it's easier to just say LSU and South Carolina were the only two that didn't make the field from the
Right.
SEC conference, which is remarkable. And in that, you have played really the best of the best that are in this field of 64,
Yeah.
60, whatever, however many teams you want to call them. So there's no one that's daunting when you look down your schedule because, I mean, you've already stared into the belly of the beast and you've made your way out of there too. So that I think that's what's interesting is really any of these teams that we have seen are poised for a run. With
I
the
don't
exception of a
disagree.
few, but you know what
No,
you know where I'm
but I
going.
do think, I do think that the SEC tournament established what we had already seen in the regular season, and that's the fact that Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee were the 4 best.
Yeah.
Texas A&M's not far out of the conversation,
And it's easy to have
but
those as your final four. When when you kind of pick your teams, it's easy to have a final four that is just SEC.
in Kentucky, if they get a guy or two back, they're without 2 starters. That's They were very average without them. Uh, they were closer to average than they were great, that's for sure. But if they're able to get a couple of guys back, and I don't know their status, their situation, but um, they're they're tough. And at the same time, you know, Robert Morris sitting there at 28-4, 28-6, whichever it is. Um, then you would draw Vanderbilt, who played Alabama really well in Tuscaloosa, and they weren't as good as they are now.
Yeah.
Uh, and obviously, St. Mary's, a 7 seed, is always good and always competitive. So Alabama will have their hands full just getting to the round of 16.
I'm going to be interested, obviously, to see because I'm not going to say I've watched a lot of Robert Morris this year. I do know that they are the Colonials, and
Very
their
good.
their mascot's nickname is Romo.
Well,
So
you're ahead of me.
okay, see, well, I had to.
Tony, is Tony the
I
nickname?
don't think it is, but
It's not Tony Romo. Okay,
no. But
just check.
I had to look and see because I was like I looked on my the brackets and a lot of times they'll have like the mascot next to it, and they didn't. They just
Yeah,
had unfortunately they have RMU, and I was like, well, that doesn't help me at all.
right.
But I mean,
I said 28-4. They're 24-8. They've won 10 straight, which is one of the top win streaks in the country. They got Coach of the Year in Andy Toole in their league. Uh, they really do a good job distributing the ball. They lead the horizon in assists, free throws, um, and they've got a guy who was their um, not their top scorer and assist man, but was their top rebounder, who was the player of the year. Alvaro Folgueras is the man's name, and Amari Dixon was the top defensive player in the
okay.
league. So that's not your top scorer or assist guy, um, and yet they also have player of the year distinction within their league.
So aside from rest and treatment and scout and everything else, what
Yeah,
does Alabama have to improve upon or change as they get ready to kind of run this gauntlet for the next, hopefully, 3 weeks or so?
I just think they need to play with the urgency they did against Kentucky and Auburn.
Yeah.
Obviously they played very, very well in those games, but there was a sense of urgency that I didn't necessarily see in the Florida game.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
There were opportunities early to kind of take control of that game, or at least give themselves a 8, 10, 12 point advantage, I thought, and they didn't do it. And then they're down at the half, and you've lost Grant. You have a horrible first trip down the floor defensively, and you just felt it was over at that point. And it's odd to say that because this team can be so explosive, but I just don't think they can afford to. I don't think if they if they play like tomorrow's a given, then
Yeah.
they're not going to be given a chance to play. They have got because that version of Alabama that we saw again against Kentucky and against Auburn is good enough to play on a Monday night for the national title. Anything less than that, though, is susceptible to getting popped by some of the teams they're going to face.
Well, and I kind of felt in the second half, obviously with Grant on the bench, Florida's lead just continuing to grow. There almost was that kind of, I'm not going to say complacency, but it settled in. They're like, okay, we're going to be a 2 seed. We're not going to be a 1. And that was what concerned me of they can't go in to this week with that feeling of complacency. And as you said, it's that sense of urgency that we need to see.
No, you're right. And I don't think they're going to take it for granted because I think they're mature enough to understand what's involved and mature enough to understand how important it is to play well from the get go. But I also think it's going to be really important that there's not they don't get themselves into a spot where um, you could go into panic mode.
Yeah.
I mean, if you come out and play like you are capable of early against Robert Morris, and I won't go beyond that, but against a team like Robert Morris that you should beat, if you come out and handle business early, you'll be fine. If you let it become a second half game, and especially a final 10 minutes game, you're going to have you're going to have the neutral site crowd getting behind the underdog. You're going to have doubt in your mind. You're going to play probably far more reserved than this team needs to play or panicked. And you got a problem. They'll start believing in themselves just like we had when Virginia was a 1 seed and got upset a few years ago. The longer you let that underdog hang around, and especially if you find yourself behind, God forbid you don't do like Virginia and drop one period, let alone by 20. Um, but I think that is the key: is taking care of that game early, uh, much as they did last year in their first game.
Well, and with the way this league has played this year, there's no doubt in my mind that none of these guys are going to walk in and be wide-eyed and looking around. They're going to take in the atmosphere, but they have played in enough big games that's kind of a non-issue.
Yeah.
How many of the guys? Because I was trying to count. How many of the guys were on last year's Final Four team?
All right, from last year, as I pull that
You had
up,
Mark.
you have Mark, you have Grant,
Yep.
you have Mo,
Yes.
you have Jaron, and that's it.
No
You have
Cliff.
4 guys.
No Cliff. No,
No,
you're right.
no, Cliff didn't. Now, Aiden Holloway was a part of the
Right.
Auburn team that lost in the first round to Yale. Um, I think Chris Youngblood, I'm pretty sure South Florida played in the tournament last year. I may be wrong, but Chris Youngblood certainly would have played in it. I don't think Cliff did. Aiden Sherrill obviously is a freshman, the same for Darion Reed. So, um, and LeBaron was a freshman. So, geez,
That's what I was
you
just
know,
curious about. Is because
you don't have a ton.
well,
You got 4,
dipping
maybe
back into
5 at the
last, yeah,
most.
just dipping back into last year's experience of having played and knowing what it takes to get to that final weekend of this tournament. I mean, obviously, 4 guys on this team is a hell of a lot more than a lot of teams have in terms of experience and getting as far as they have. But I do think, having that calming presence of we've been here before. We've
Well, especially with a guard
yeah.
in Mark Sears, the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands the most. that has a lot to do, and I think he'll help LeBaron and Aiden and even Chris, who's a veteran guy,
Yeah.
but doesn't have the extensive tournament experience that Mark does, because this is 3 straight years now for Mark Sears, and while they did, they've gone what, Final Four, Sweet 16, Sweet 16. Is that right?
I think so.
I think so. Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. Speaking of which, do you think Nate Oats' phone will ring with any openings that might be coming available?
Uh, Look, I think it rings every year to his agent. He made it clear. He's made it clear though that from a college standpoint, Alabama's where he wants to be. And Greg Burns has been very proactive. And I think Nate respects it. The fact that he's come to him before Greg has to go to Nate. Does that make sense? I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
Kentucky concerned me last year. It's closer to where he's from, where he's been. It's Kentucky. It said with the utmost respect of who they are historically. That one concerned me. Um, Indiana doesn't really worry me. That's coming open.
Yeah.
Um, Michigan, I was a tad concerned. Michigan State would concern me more because of his respect for Tom Izzo and his
Villanova?
his past there. No, I don't know. Villanova's not for Nate. That one doesn't concern me. They're not going to have they're not going to have the resources because of football, the money that football brings. Nate wants to win more than anything else. I mean, is it a business? And you're talking about, making sure your contract is competitive, of course, but you're going to have that at Alabama. The other thing is, do you have the resources to win at the highest level? And he's going to be given those at Alabama. They continue to show that. They continue to grow what it takes resource wise. They're building uh, basically a facility that is exclusive for men's basketball. I mean, dirt's moved
Yeah.
to make that happen. That's not just in the drawing phase. It's more important than an arena itself, even though I think there's still conversation about that, or uh, a redo of Coleman, if not something to replace it. So, but there's tangible work being done to improve facilities that do impact the student athletes on a daily basis. So that's being shown in addition to taking care of what needs to be taken care of to be competitive NIL, as well as um, making sure that his contract is up there with just about anybody in the country.
Well, and finally, I think this is truly a crowning achievement for Greg Sankey when you look at what the SEC has done this year in terms of dominating the field of 64, 68, whatever we want to talk about for this
Yeah,
tournament.
no doubt. 14, three more than any league had ever gotten in. Um, here's what will be interesting though. Um, at best, there's going to be 13 teams remaining after the second round, at best,
Hmm.
because you could face each other. And maybe it's in another bracket. I hadn't looked, but obviously, if the SEC teams win out, then it's going to be Alabama Vandy to see who goes to the Sweet
Yeah.
16. So one's going to be eliminated,
Hmm.
even if things go. There's potential of two being gone, but one will be gone at a minimum by the time we get to the Sweet 16. How do the rest of those
Yeah.
actually do now that we get to the tournament itself? How do they handle the pressure? They were great in the pre-conference. We know what a buzzsaw it was within the league and a meat grinder, whatever expression you want to use. But now it's everybody in there, and who's going to win the battle royal? Who's going to get thrown over the top rope?
Yeah.
As you got everybody in there at one point.
Okay, so Chris, Friday morning at 11:40 a.m., taking on Robert Morris, the Colonials. And if you are looking for Chris before then, well, he'll be in Cleveland. But
That's right.
if you're looking for him, you can always find him at chrisstewart.online. We need to give a big thanks to Scott Forrester for today for not only his patience coordinating technology, putting up with us. I mean, I think you deserve a raise. I don't know.
Put him down.
I'm gonna let Chris handle that part of it, but I
Yeah,
think
sure. Why not? Because I got all that pulled.
I think you deserve a raise. But Scott, thank you for all of your patience today. Everything you need to know and everything you are looking for can be found at Cover Crimson, as well as every single day on the Next Round with Jim and Ryan and Lance. For Scott Forrester and Chris Stewart, I am Kelly Hunter. We thank y'all so much for watching. We look forward to seeing you next week to hopefully talk about 2 big wins. Chris, we need a March Madness.
Roll Tide.
We'll see y'all next week. Take care.